Welcome to Auto News Online, the Classics Edition. Today, we're talking about the shape of things to come, the Triumph TR7. The Triumph TR7 hails from an era where the predominant design philosophy was one of the wedge. And you saw a lot of supercars that came out, or hypercars that came out during that time, that had that as a design modality, whether it was the Lotus Esprit, the Bricklin SV1, the Tomso Pantera, and probably the penultimate of all of them, the Lancia Stratus, which was designed by Baritone. These cars set the design theme for the decade and influenced so many cars, including this one, including the TR7. The TR7 replaced the TR6, and the TR6 was really an old-fashioned car by the time it was replaced by the TR7. That replacement, coming from the TR6 to the TR7, put off a lot of buyers. They went from a very traditional English two-seater to a very non-traditional shape, and that was pretty shocking at the time for the consumers. This car in particular is a clone or a tribute built as a Sprint model. The Sprint model was one of many models they had, but it was probably one of the rarest because they only made about 60 of them. The reason they only made 60 is up for debate, but most people agree that the problem was that the TR8 was coming out shortly after, and most people just would rather wait for the V8 than opt for the more high-performance four-cylinder. So this car has a 2-liter slant four-cylinder. It's putting out about probably 120 horsepower. It has twin SU carburetors and a 16-valve head, a 5-speed transmission, and a DeLion axle setup with a 391 gear. The car is very quick off the line. It doesn't have a lot of top end, but it is really fun to drive. It handles really well. McPherson struts, big sway bars, full setup for suspension on a car of this era. So it handles and drives pretty much like a modern car. Disc brakes up front, drum brakes in the back. Walking up to the car, one first notices how radical the shape of this car is. The car's design, it's extremely flat, it's extremely sharp-edged, and very low to the ground, and echoes all those design themes of that wedge era of design that was so popular in the late 70s. The design, I think, stands the test of time, to my eyes at least. It's very unusual to see one of these on the road, and so it's almost like a pocket exotic in that regard. When I take this car anywhere, people respond extremely well to it because it's just so unusual looking. The interior is snug but comfortable. I've driven this car hundreds of miles at a time, and it's very comfortable, and I'm very tall, 6'3", so it could fit just about anybody in it. The layout of the dash is very standard. Speedometer, tachometer, all the normal gauges that you would have in a sports car. The interior itself also replicates some of the sharp angles that you see on the exterior of the car, but the interior is mostly hard plastics. And honestly, the whole build quality of the car is average. This car is equipped with a manual choke, so jumping in and starting it from a cold, you pull out the choke, hit it, and it starts right up, let it warm up, ease the choke back, and the car runs really, really well. It's a very economical car, meaning that it gets in the high 20s miles per gallon, and it's an extremely reliable car, although I would say it's a little bit finicky to get the carbs tuned and sort of get it all sorted. But once it's sorted, these things run extremely well, and they tend to last. They tend to be quite reliable and last. When you start this car, the first thing you notice in this particular car is the exhaust note. It has long tube headers that feed into a cherry bomb muffler, so it's quite loud, and it makes a lot of wonderful backfiring on decompression cycles, and it's a fun car to drive. It's very involved, and the sounds are really wonderful. Driving this car, the gearbox moves very easily. It's not quite as fluid as some of the industry standards like the Miata, but it's really good for the era. Short shifts, very positive. The clutch is extremely light, and the car feels very much up on its toes, very agile. The view from the driver's seat is very first person. It feels very much like a video game or a motorcycle. The driver is completely engaged in driving. You feel every bump and pebble. The suspension transmits that back to you as the driver. And you always know where the car is. But the car is so tiny that on the highway, given its size and given its lack of modern safety equipment, it is a little bit nerve-wracking. The Triumph, especially this one with the Dolomite 16-valve head, the twin SU 6 carburetors, long tube headers, and a full polyurethane suspension, makes this automotive a blast to drive. The design stands the test of time for me. It still has a presence, and it's almost like a mini exotic, especially when you consider that the price to get into one of these is sub $10,000. Maybe this is an exotic. When's the last time that you saw one at a car show or at a Cars and Coffee? Hey, thanks for tuning in. Auto News Online. Check us out, like us, subscribe. See you, YouTubers.